When it comes to creatures that we have prepared to talk about for tonight, you mentioned Bigfoot, and maybe that will be a good starting point for tonight. So, who or what is Bigfoot? How can we explain this creature if it exists at all?
Yeah, so most Bigfoot encounters describe a large, about 6 to 8 feet, give a foot or two error, large, very hairy man who lives in the woods, exhibits strong animalian characteristics, strong mischievous characteristics, not especially malicious. As I said, it hovers in, and I put the woods with an asterisk there because the entity that's called Bigfoot has been described like basically globally. So where I live, I don't live in a wooded area. There's a Bigfoot seeking society like just down the road. And they have people who've seen Bigfoot, not in like farmers' fields. There are people who claim to have seen Bigfoot in Tibet. There are people who claim to have seen Bigfoot in China. The oldest reference I've encountered is in the Classic of Tea, which asserts that a very popular blend of tea in China at the time had been given to a Taoist priest by Bigfoot. He was just wandering through the woods and Bigfoot was like, tea. There's a similar story involving sake from Japan. That one's not so historical. It's in Toriyama Sekien's Hyaki Ikiagyo. I'm sure I mispronounced that. My apologies. Ain't listening Japanese. Stories about Bigfoot from the Polynesia and New Zealand, where there are no trees at all. Stories about stories about Bigfoot from England and from Greece and even from Israel. As I said, so maybe Wood is wrong. He's like nature or the wilds might be better, which is why certain theosophical groups have concluded he's some sort of magical nature spirit. The modern, I guess, the view of primatologists, at least primatologists who believe in Bigfoot, is he's some sort of undiscovered monkey. That's problematic for just based off his spread, right? It makes sense if we're just talking about Northwest. So, like, when people talk about Bigfoot, they often just talk about him as if he lived in Cascadia, right? New Brunswick, British Columbia, down into like Oregon, Washington State, maybe parts of North California, parts of Idaho, the whole boreal, the forests in that particular area. Belief in an undiscovered ape man or even some kind of mythical bear becomes more problematic once we start moving into south and into like Australia. Like there's been Bigfoot sightings in Australia where there is no forest for an undiscovered ape to hide in. This has led many to conclude that Bigfoot is probably not some kind of monkey. The main contender, I guess, is what we might call I'm going to be a little rude or overgeneralizing, and I'm going to call it the Fortean view, because if we just focus on weird Bigfoot encounters, they'll occlude the fact that the stunning majority, 99% of all Bigfoot encounters I have read or personally recorded, because I've spoken to hundreds of people about not just Bigfoot, but other topics, supernatural topics over the years, involve a completely harmless ape man in the woods / mountaintop / Australian outback. So we're a bit of an impasse if we're just going at it from established views, because the monkey / bear, sorry, I blanked for a minute, is probably not true. At the same time, a lot of the weirder views floated out there are either too implausible. I refer here to the theory that Bigfoot is a complex space alien who's secretly controlling the Pentagon, or for whatever reason are just contradicted by the vast majority of the rest of the evidence, which, as Charles Fort would have said, is just as important as the evidence that we normally neglect.
So you're saying there's like these two extreme ends of Bigfoot study. One which is like focuses it super hard on the mundanest, and then the other one that's like, what's the most extreme stories we can find, and we're just gonna record those because the other ones are boring.
Basically, that's sort of the case. Obviously, that's going to be a bit of an oversimplification. People are probably going to be able to pull a book out of a hat that's like, no, but this one is, or some podcast that has more reasonable views, but very vaguely, yes. And then the additional problem is that these two views, the Bigfoots involved, are like almost two totally different creatures. In fact, so much so that I have seen at least one author conclude that they must be two different creatures. I cannot remember the acronym he uses for weird Bigfoot, but he basically calls it the giant, hairy, stinky man. As opposed, because Bigfoot of the woods, he just stands there. Like 90% of Bigfoot accounts are the person sees him looking at them, and then like Bigfoot walks off. And there are exceptions where like Bigfoot does something that's maybe playful or maybe informative, but not usually nothing usually absurd or beyond what might be expected by, say, a rudimentarily intelligent, semi-spiritual entity living in the woods. So the story with the T, little weird, not too weird. The story, on the other hand, the story flying a spaceship, very strange. And as I said, some people have concluded that they are in fact two separate entities. I consider that view more sound, just because a lot of the strange Bigfoot encounters involve plenty of other entities on like the same flying saucer or in the background. And it's more probable that it's a disguise than that it's Bigfoot the Ape Man, or one and the same Bigfoot, I should say.